There are little things that are consistent in this world. Death, taxes, and Dragon Ball games are among them. Being one of the oldest, most popular, and most successful cartoons around, the series is no stranger to video games spanning multiple genres and quality over its 40 years of relevance. And with the recent announcement of Dragon Ball Daima, for better or worse, we're not going to see this well dry up anytime soon. With so many games released, it would be hard to pick the right one for our first video about this historic franchise, or so you would think, because we were lucky enough to grow up in the 2000s when anime is making its first big push in the US, and Dragon Ball proved to be just popular enough to make its return to video games with today's title, our first Dragon Ball game. This is Team Crossbody, and this is Dragon Ball Z Budokai's Runback. The Dragon Ball Z Budokai games were developed by DIMPS, a development team that consists of several former SNK and Capcom staff, including Takayashi Nishiyama and Hiroshi Matsumoto, co-creators of several important fighting games such as Street Fighter and The King of Fighters. Although they developed most, if not all, of the modern Dragon Ball games, they may be more known for their run with the Sonic the Hedgehog series, starting with Sonic Advance and ending with Sonic Lost World. The team also created some very good lesser-known games like the Rumblefish series, Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, and Soul Calibur 6. But they also developed some absolute stinkers like Crash Boom Bang, Sonic the Hedgehog 4, and Dragon Ball The Breakers. Those games come to mind. So the long and short is, when DIMPS is on the ball, they're really on the ball. But they are capable of some wide-ass misses, which I guess any company is capable of. I still like them. I really don't think I need to explain the plot of Dragon Ball. If you're watching this video, then there's no question you already know the story, whether it be intimate or even a courtesy glance. The tale of Dragon Ball is one of the most known and celebrated tales in the media, with Dragon Ball Z Budokai attempting to emulate the three major story arcs of the series, which are the Saiyan, Namek, and Android sagas, by hitting the more important fights and set pieces in the series. And for their first attempt, I think DIMPS did an amazing job at recreating these hallmark moments for the series, inconsistencies aside. Due to the abridged nature of the story mode, some of the more important details and contexts are lost, but for a 2002 retelling of a long finished series, it's really impressive, and I can see how someone can use this as their introduction. It really is a good job. This is a pretty meaty game mode, clocking in about an hour and a half depending on the difficulty and whatnot, but it's not all that there is to offer. Upon finishing the mode, you'll be able to play through unique what-if storylines, one within each saga. These stories here are pretty entertaining if a little simple. There's another unlockable what-if story, but we'll cover that later. As can be said for most games that's the first in the long run of the series, the graphics of Budokai 1 don't hold up as well as the future entries, choosing to go for admittedly generic 3D aesthetic. It still manages to capture the Toriyama art style fairly well, but what bothers me about the graphical style is the blocky nature of it. It's hard to explain, but it feels like there's too much negative space on the character models. They look bloated. The animation on hand hair, while serviceable, is clunky, choppy, and stiff, which make the characters come across like they're riddled with arthritis and are too afraid to move. There's also a ton of recycled animation, like a whole lot. The game coloring is fine for the characters. They're bright and colorful like on the show. As for the stages,
They're all based off show locations, so grasslands, mountain ranges, Planet Namek, Kami's Lookout, and the Cell Games Arena are all represented. The problem with the stage is that they all look so lifeless, with big open spaces usually made up of one color the majority of the time. It feels like you're fighting in a cardboard diorama of the stage instead of actually being there. And in that case, I guess the hyperbolic time chamber is the best looking stage in the game, since it's meant to convey that loneliness. But with the lack of shading on locations and characters, the basic layout of stages and the flat coloring, things can look a tad washed out. But I don't want to sit here and just trash on the game completely, because I believe this is just the second fully 3D Dragon Ball game, with the first being Final Bout. And graphically, it is a step up from there.
Well, duh.
As yet to be surpassed if we're talking about Dragon Ball Z game music. The first game's music might be the safest of the series, leaning heavily on the rock side of things with very few jazzy funk vibes these games will soon be known for. But what's on hand here is still good for adding atmosphere to the fights. The soundtrack was made up of many different performers, chief among them being Kenji Yadamoto, who later found himself in a plagiarism scandal surrounding these games, which resulted in his music being removed from future games such as the Dragon Ball Z Budokai collection. Look, I know plagiarism is the big bad and all, and I certainly don't condone the act, but to be fair, if it weren't for his extreme sampling, I guess that's what words he would call it, I would have never been introduced to some of my favorite bands that I listen to religiously today, like Black Sabbath, Journey, and especially the mighty Stratovarius. So I have a hard time not looking at the man with some level of fondness. We don't know what became of Yadamoto after the scandal, but I like to think that he's currently on the run from Toei and is now living underground as a soldier of fortune. And if you can find him, he'll be happy to lift some tunes for you. For once, we're going to bring up the gameplay modes in one of these videos because we keep forgetting to add it. Dragon Ball Z Budokai has a good number of things to do with about 5 gameplay focused modes. Of course, you have the story mode, but there's also Versus, World Tournament, Practice, and the unlockable Legend of Hercule mode, with the other option being, well, options, and then the editing skill / shop area. Since we already covered the story, let's quickly run down the other modes available. Versus mode is exactly what you think it is, and does exactly what you think it does. You can either choose to play with a friend, the CPU, or watch the CPU play both characters. World Tournament mode will have your chosen fighter compete for a large sum of Zenny, the currency in the Dragon Ball world. By selecting your difficulty at the beginning, this can change the number of fights, how tough the opponents are, and the payout if you find your way to the top. What's also neat is that matches actually play by tournament rulings, so KOing the opponent isn't the only option, as throwing them out of the ring is perfectly acceptable. This will be your only way to obtain Zenith for the shop system. Practice mode had you beat up on a dummy in a safe environment. There's a couple of options that take advantage of certain situations that might actually come up in a real match, but it's mostly pointless. You can't even set up 2 players if you actually want to laugh something out. The Legend of Hercule mode will unlock after you've gotten not only Hercule, but all the other characters with the exception of the Great Saiyaman. He's in this game too. And win an Adept World Tournament run. After that, go to the item shop and it'll be there to buy in the recommended section. This is the other what if story that was mentioned earlier. In this mode, which has its own title section for whatever reason, you play the guy. No, not Darkside Phil.
I'll be giving away 2 copies of RoboCop.
The actual guy, the dude, the man, the best character in the series, the world's martial arts champion, Hercule. This is set at the beginning of the Cell games, when he makes his grand appearance, but instead of being bitch slapped away to make room for the real fight, he hangs around and challenges every single contestant, starting at Yamcha all the way to Cell himself while fighting under special conditions at times, and proceeds to beat the brakes off of all of them in an attempt to grift his shitty book on people. But I guess he just did save the world from Cell, so maybe the book isn't entirely shitty. I enjoy this mode a lot. It's funny and does the right thing for the community and brings this man into the spotlight. He has something to say about everyone at the games except Yamcha, because he's the first victim. I'm a massive fan of Hercule, so returning to the silly mode after all this time brought a smile to my face. And then there's the other options menu, who cares? And then we get to the skill edit system, which brings us to the core of the game. Skills are the skill capsule system, or ESS, exciting skill system, or whatever the real name is, serves as the main hook of the Dragon Ball Z Budokai games. The long and short is that it allows the player to customize characters with loadouts, giving them the ability to bring out their own unique fighter into a match. What you're allowed to put into said loadout is defined by 3 categories. Abilities are capsules that provide the character with their signature abilities, from blast attacks, transformations, and ultimate attacks. Physical skills is where all the most memorable moves go, like Zanku Fist, Evil Dance, and Cybernetic Radar. That's kind of a dope name for a move though. In reality, this is where all the filler moves go. For some reason, throws need to be equipped into a fighter. Try figuring that one out. I could understand if throws weren't absolutely needed in this game, but they really are. More on that later. Equipables with unique effects and stat modifying abilities go here under the support tag. For something as simple as upping your attack and defense, to infecting your opponent with a heart virus that they'll need to counteract with a vaccine. Equipping multiples of the same skill will power it up, and this can be done up to 3 times per skill. For what it's worth, there's a visual change to some of the moves in the match as they do more damage, so that's kinda neat. And that's what this system is, kinda neat. Dims expected players to go over their friend's house to play and trade these things around like scuffed Yu-Gi-Oh cards, but the truth is, there's not a lot here to promote all that. I might be missing something, but it's not like the skills are locked behind exclusive Budokai games. Everything is unlockable in-game, so why would I ever brave the streets of Philadelphia with a memory card in my pocket in 2002? Another reason why this just doesn't work, at least for me, is the fact that while they wanted people to make a unique version of their character, no one wanted to equip 2 to 3 general vests, because you only have 7 slots to play around with, which is either evil or some kind of theming. Some characters like Goku are positively bedridden with transformations that will easily take most of his slots. So players who want to play as a Super Saiyan and do a cool yellow Kamehameha will have to equip 3 versions of Kaioken, that's called Ken's Fist for some reason, then equip a Super Saiyan skill, which is already like 4 slots. Then you need a throw. So here, that's 5 ways before you can throw any kind of special attack on that tray. It just seems really annoying and cumbersome to try to do anything else. I suppose if you're still unlocking these skills, filling them up with support moves would be an option. But I don't know, man, I could be wrong. As a kid, I never used any of these support skills and just opted for more powerful attacks overall. By getting the Dragon Balls, you can unlock a single character's breakthrough skill, which allows them to use all of their abilities at 1.5 their normal power. And this is the most optimal way to build a character. Overall, I wanted to say that the skill system is this super slept on part of the game, but it's mostly just kind of annoying. This is a mindset I kept throughout, so the future videos about the Budokai series might just omit this part of the game entirely, unless there's something cool that can come from it.
Dragon Ball Z Budokai carries the weight of being the first console Dragon Ball game in 5 years, following the questionable GT final bout. And if there was a mission going in to be better than that one, then mission accomplished. Although it really wasn't much of a hurdle to jump, but they did indeed do it. Budokai is better than Final Bout.
Well done.
This is a 3D fighter with a focus on being simple, so the game sports an equally simple 4-button control setup of punch, kick, energy, and guard. Punch, kick, and guard shouldn't shock anyone by their function, but there's something going on with the energy button. Hitting the button on its own will allow the character to shoot out a little deflectable energy blast, but pressing the button after a sequence of other buttons will allow the character to perform a skill. Every skill outside of throw requires an energy button to be used. Speaking of skills, Budokai will have you perform these legendary attacks in the oddball manner. Instead of using commands like quarter circle forward or forward down forward, the game will rather have you complete this certain sequence of strings, such as punch 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 E or punch punch K K E. And while doing special moves this way are certainly unique, I'm not sure if it was entirely needed. Normal fighting game commands would have been perfectly viable, since the character could only move in 3D space while pressing the guard or up and down at the same time. All this did was limit combat options. There's a couple of button combinations that do special things. Pressing PG will allow you to throw your opponent if it's equipped. PKG will enable your character to transform. Transformation increases attack power but drains ki, while in this state, getting knocked down while under the base requirements of that transformation will cause your character to revert back to a previous state or return to their base form. While guarding, pressing the back button twice will allow your character to ki charge, allow them to use skills. Finding the proper moments to sneak some charging in is very important. This will usually happen during knockdowns. Hitting all the face buttons will have you taunt. Taunting reduces ki by 1 point. Pressing PK or KG will have the character charge energy into a single attack. I don't know the name of these attacks, but we'll just call them charge attacks. These attacks are unblockable if fully charged, and are immune to basic strikes while they're active, only losing to skills and throws. Although the immunity of these moves seems to be inconsistent, which could be seen in a lot of areas of this gameplay, but we'll get into that in a bit. When two attacks of the same kind connect, the screen will freeze and both players will be thrown into a special state called a burst zone. During this, both fighters will begin to throw punches and kicks at supersonic speeds while bad lightning effects surround them. At this time, the players will have to spin a left analog stick or mash the face buttons. By the end of this minigame, the player who has the most inputs will come out on top of it, knocking the opponent away or popping them up, the result depending on the character chosen. If the player is doing particularly bad during the burst zone, the opponent attacks will begin to connect. I assume this added extra damage, but I was way too busy mashing to check it. Sorry. Much like the show, characters can fly, but they need a little bit of assistance getting up there. Hitting the opponent with a Larsen attack will leave them in the air. That's about it. There is no change in the character's movesets for as far as I know. Certain stages have transitions attached to them. They can be done by knocking an opponent past the edge of the stage. It's just used for extra damage, though it does look cool at the end of combos. While performing the charge attack, it can be cancelled by hitting the guard button. This will return your character to a neutral stance. Some strings may have a chargeable property somewhere in them, and by cancelling these attacks, it will allow the character to go to another string if there's enough hits done from the last cancelled attack. This can be used for pressure on block or combo extensions. Sidestepping after a cancelled attack to get behind the opponent will earn you with a stun, allowing you to do further follow-ups and damage. This is the most advanced the game gets, which is a bad thing because it's all downhill from here.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. Budokai 1's gameplay is bad. Like, really bad. If you care about the viability of a fighting game that's over 20 years old. The game is just plain inconsistent to a ridiculous degree, even for 2002 standards. Bloody Roar 3, Dead or Alive 3, Fighting Vipers 2, Tekken 4, and Virtua Fighter 4 all released a year early, and there were plenty more before 2001, so I don't understand why this game is so sloppy. There's a ton of issues, but I'm just gonna rapid fire a couple of these. Blast attacks can be done with just a punch 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 E string. The problem here is that unless these strings don't end with popping the opponent up, then they won't combo. Luckily there's more than one way to pull these off, but it's still strange. Adding on to this issue is the fact that even if you can combo off the basic punch string, the actual skill is unsafe on hit, and doesn't knock the opponent back, so doing them just puts you at a disadvantage. Not all moves do this, but most do. Particular basic kicking animation has the tendency to whiff after 2 or 3 hits in. This string is mostly given to the bigger characters. Other than charging attacks, dashing attacks, and throws, there is no true way to break guard. Matches devolve into block, attack, while trying to sneak in the throw, which can get pretty monotonous if you're playing the game any longer like an hour, being generous. Unless we were playing wrongly, there is no real triangle system like the usual block, strike, throw in this game. The closest we can piece together is block, strike, charge attack, and I guess those are supposed to lose the throws, but there were several occasions when throws lose cleanly to these attacks. Blast attacks seem to do way less damage than other attacks, which doesn't make sense because these are attacks that destroy entire planets and vaporize whole non-key protected people. I guess this was a way of balancing due to these attacks being tied to the end of strings, and I guess that makes sense? It's still stupid. Throws shouldn't be doing more damage than the Kamehameha and Galick Gun. Some skill activations are so slow that they don't even combo out of strings, wasting ki and leaving you unsafe. The best way to land these are through staggering them or landing them from behind the opponent because the other character will have to turn so they can't block. Look, I want to say that the game having so many issues means that it was unfun to play, but the truth is, if 2 players go into it knowing that it's flawed like this, there is fun to be had. Just look at how many matches we play, and that's just from one recorded segment. We wouldn't have played so many matches if the game was truly a chore to play. Once gotten into a kind of rhythm, a meta starts to develop. Not a very good one, but a meta nonetheless, where you can begin to take advantage of what little unique traits your characters have to gain some kind of edge. There's fun. It's not long fun, but there's fun.
Is Dragon Ball Z Budokai a good video game? Yes. The story mode alone I believe is enough to check out this unique part of DBZ gaming history. There's plenty of content and unlocks to be discovered, even if a lot of those unlocks are samey looking moves. And the combat system isn't too bad when you're just playing the AI to get to those things. But is it a good fighting game? No. Shockingly, I know. Similar to a kind of heart, Bloody Roar 3 and Mortal Kombat 4, Dragon Ball Z Budokai is a game that we hold dear, especially since we had to repeat the story mode so many times for us not having a memory card. Back in the day, we didn't care about the game mechanically, we just had fun mashing around, and that's where the game is at its best when it's not being taken too seriously, because to be fair, there is nothing in terms of compelling gameplay here, even for the time. Of course, anyone who knows anything about this series of games know that it's all uphill from here. Well, sort of. We'll get to you soon, Budokai 2 and Burst Limit. But putting those two aside, there was nothing that the first entry had that couldn't be expanded on. And luckily it was proven, while not a good fighting game, Budokai 1 was a very good starter point for the series. See you next time on The Runback.